Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Pre-Planning Commission meeting for the month of June. We have, we'll do a quick roll call so we know who is with us. Commissioner Strawson?
Present. Commissioner Strawson present.
Commissioner Sparati?
Commissioner Sparati present.
Alderman Russell?
Alderman Russell present.
And Commissioner Beatty and Manalis are not with us today. So the first thing on the agenda are some continuances. Gabrielle, you want to tell us about those?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Yes, we do have two continuances related to the Frederick Commerce project. That's both the preliminary plat and the forest conservation plan that were at our workshop last month. They have requested a 30-day continuance to our July meeting so as to resolve some issues that we are still working through with our forest conservation plan and how that ties into the preliminary subdivision plat. So that will be to the July 12th meeting.
Okay. I can see all of you. Are there any questions? And we just were joined, or Ron or Commissioner Beatty just joined us.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. All right, so that takes us to the annexation for Winpenny Tell was withdrawn. So Gabrielle, again, if you can give us some context on this.
Right. Thank you. Yes, we did want to make sure we put this on the agenda because it has been continued, I believe, and I apologize, I don't have the exact date. It might have been September that we originally reviewed this application. It was many, many months ago, and they have been requesting continuances since then in hopes of resolving some of the issues they were working through related to road access to the site and how that works with the counties, tying into a county road. They have decided at this point to withdraw the application, so we wanted to keep it on the agenda to keep anybody who was following the case in the loop and that it didn't just kind of fall off the face of the earth, that it has been formally withdrawn.
So there's no action that has to happen, right? And it doesn't need to be, should it be mentioned by the chair?
If you would like to have this discussion and just have me touch base on it, I think that would be a good idea, just so that everybody is completely transparent to the community as to the status of the project. There is no formal action, though. The applicant is entitled to withdraw both under our local ordinance and annexations are largely controlled in the state by the Annotated Code of Maryland. So we have reviewed the Annotated Code section to make sure that that we're proceeding as we should. So they can fully withdraw and no action is needed on your part. But I think it would be good to have this quick discussion at the hearing.
I can see all of you. Are there any questions or comments? All right, a lot of head nodding. No. Okay. That takes us to new business and Stauffer's Funeral Home.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Stauffer's Funeral Home here. We've got the final site plan in conjunction with the forest conservation plan. I recall logging off the other day. I think I moved fairly quickly through the item, and one thing I'd like to take accountability for is not really touching too much on the forest conservation there. That would be PC 21194. Not much to report, just the same issues and the same background on that matter as the site plan component. Obviously, the property and the use has been quite established there at the property for quite some time, number of decades. Site plan came in, the desire of the applicant to establish a new infrastructure. So technicality, just bring it up to the 2005 LMC. So that is what is the bulk of the staff report on how we're going to do so. But as for the forest conservation requirements, section 721, just working with the applicants quickly, trying to fit in, new trees, extensive landscaping, section 605, a couple of modification requests, but the forest conservation, this was a good opportunity, or not opportunity. This was a situation where that fee in lieu of is not always the most desirable option, but just the property's been in use for so long. This was a case where staff, we have the blessing to accept that proposed fee. I believe it's around $4,440. So that will go into the city's forest conservation fund. But yeah, it did not mention that at a workshop. Be sure to touch on that on Monday. But once again, site plan, bring it up to 2005 LMC standards. Few modification requests. There were two for the parking lot and property line screening. The nature of those, it's not that there is not screening or unable to have screening on the property. The current conditions actually have quite a bit of screening, some of which is technically on the adjacent property. And we also have a building fairly close to the proximity of the property line. Site plan is facing west. It would appear, looking at north, but looking west, there's quite a bit of screening there. So try to spell that out in the staff report, new formats for just, where we're coming from for the 2010 comprehensive plan and in support of those modifications. So I believe that's it. Nothing really new came in. There was one modification request for lighting. They have a proposed walkway with the adjacent property for parking and just the uses there with the church to the north, but nothing too new, and we'll make sure to run everything on Monday as well. So.
Okay, we will do a roll call for questions and comments on both of these items relative to staffers. So let's start with Commissioner Strassen.
Commissioner Strassen, I have no questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Commissioner Sparati.
Yes, I just have one quick question. I actually rent office space in the complex right across from here. So right next to Stauffer's Funeral Home, there's a house and then there's the church. Do we know if that house is part of the church property, so it's not really infected by the light, or?
I believe I know off the top of my head which home you're speaking of. I'm trying to pull up some aerial imagery. I believe that's to the north, correct?
Ooh. I was not a Girl Scout. I am so sorry.
Oh, no
To the
worries.
Heading the opposite direction of 15?
Sure. Commissioner Sparati, I've got the bird's eye view.
Mhm.
I believe that yes, just to the north. The scope of the site plan does show that minor light spillover. I am not convinced with the data that's shown it would have a substantial impact on that house. But if it is my understanding, yes, we are talking about the same property. It is the intention to provide minimal spillover, just for the sake of safety and functionality, to have pedestrian access with an easement as well to that property for parking and just access purposes.
Great, thank you. That was my only question.
Sure.
Commissioner Beatty.
Commissioner Beatty, I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Russell.
Just to follow up on Commissioner Sparati's question, have we heard any feedback from the adjacent properties in opposition or with any concerns about this?
Not to my knowledge. Everything is followed protocol and adjacent property owner notification, and we did not receive any public comment at workshop or NAC hearing. But we'll see if anything comes in on Monday. At this time, I do not believe so.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate your attention to detail.
Thank you.
Interesting, just looking at the GIS data, and it's not always 100% accurate. It's based on state tax assessment records. It does look like the house is actually part of the church property. It's on the same physical lot. We can check with the applicant. I know they have a relationship with the church. It might be that house is used in service of the church, either as a clergy person's home or something. So it might be part and parcel of that same use and not an independent residence, but that's something we can look into for Monday. It's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
And Charles, there's no new information from the workshop. Well, you expounded on a couple things that you didn't talk about at the workshop, but was there anything new from the applicant? I didn't see it in the staff report.
No, ma'am, there would be no new information, just a document that was expected that we received, and no new information or changes, alterations.
Okay. All right, so I'm looking at all of you. Anything further? Okay, I think we're good on that one. Next thing on the agenda is the zoning map amendment for Monocacy Boulevard, parcel CE and F.
Great, thank you, Gabrielle, again. There's nothing new to add. This was continued from last month's meeting at the request of the applicant. They, after we had already published the staff report and the agenda, had asked for a 30-day continuance. So basically the information you have in the staff report is exactly the same as the information you had last month that we did not discuss. But this will be the first of 2 hearings on this application for the rezoning to M1 from PB. And I don't have any additional information to add at this time.
Okay, terrific. We will do the roll call again. Commissioner Strassen.
Commissioner Strassen, so this was not one that was at workshop, but this is the one that we saw at workshop for last month with Bruce Dean, right?
This would
Sorry, I
have
did
been
take the packet up this morning. I haven't really had a chance to look at it yet.
sure. This would have been at the workshop in, this is June. This would have been at the workshop in April.
Okay.
And then it would have been on the hearing. It was added to the hearing for May, continued for 30 days.
Gotcha.
So I have to go back.
And we didn't see it last workshop. Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Sparati.
Commissioner Sprati, no questions. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Beatty.
The only question I have here, and this is, I guess, because of my newbie status, and I didn't get a chance to look at the differences between, what are the differences between the zoning? My guess is, from what I'm reading here, is this is going from business classification to light industrial. Would that be?
Correct, exactly. Great question. So the PB zoning district is, it's a pretty limited zoning district. It's professional business. It allows typical office type uses, but we've done some amendments to it over the years that have introduced some support services. So maybe you have office and now you have things like a hair salon and a barber and a gym and some of those type of support industries. Interestingly, we added residential as a conditional use not too long ago, so that you could have kind of that live work environment, start inputting residences in close proximity to offices, right? That's good for everything. So that's the PB zoning district. Light industrial is generally industrial type uses that don't need a lot of controls to control odor, smoke, dust. So, you know, these aren't our heavy manufacturing. Nobody's grinding up stone or smelting metal or doing whatever they do. In our M2, which is a heavy industrial zoning district, which the city doesn't have a ton of anyway, just based on the land that we have available and the cost probably of it. So, right, this would go from a business classification, office type environment to light industrial. Office uses are permitted in light industrial. So you do have some overlap, but generally the building standards compared in the different districts, M1 is going to allow for a lot more impervious surface. It's going to have some greater setbacks in the rear setback, for example, is greater because you have maybe more intensive land uses that you're trying to buffer a little bit better, versus PB, where you might want to have a more urban environment, so you have smaller setbacks, so we can have buildings closer to each other and create that kind of street feel. So in addition to uses, when you're changing zoning, you're also changing the bulk and dimensional standards that apply to those uses, as well as things like landscaping. The buffers in an M1 district are going to be more intense. You're going to have bigger buffers adjacent to other land uses than in PB, where once again you're assuming that those uses are compatible with other uses. So it's kind of a bundle of sticks that the zoning comes with. It comes with the land uses, the design requirements, and all of those good things. So
Okay, and a follow-up question: when do we, as a group, or this being next to the airport, are there any height restrictions? And who does the analysis in terms of safety when it comes to the airport, et cetera?
Sure. So we do have an airport overlay zoning district, which is a boundary that surrounds, it's a fairly large portion of the city that actually falls within the airport overlay. And as part of that, there's specific section in our code, I think it's 419, that are the airport overlay zoning district requirements. So all of the things that will apply in the M1 or the PB, whichever it were, would also be subject to these airport overlay restrictions, which are an added layer of regulations that specifically address, as you point out, the proximity to the airport. So one of those requirements is that anything within the airport overlay, as it develops through the site plan process, they have to file a Form 7460 with both the Maryland Aviation Authority and Administration and the FAA. So when a site plan comes in and we actually know the elevation they're building at, the height of the building, how it all sits on the land, then they file that form through the FAA and MAA. And then that is something that you'll come to see sometimes as a condition of their site plan approval. So we may bring you a plan, you'll approve the site plan conditioned upon us getting that final approval. Some properties are actually within runway protection zones. So from each of the runways, there are areas, I don't know all the specifics about how they were designed. And those are even more restrictive in terms of types of activities, even down to the level of stormwater management. You don't want to create big ponds at the end of a runway protection zone that is going to attract 1 million geese and, you know, wildlife that would be, you know, that would conflict with airport operations. So a lot of developments that come through this process, we work closely with the airport staff on, so we route plans to the airport manager. Some things actually go to the airport commission for recommendations. Certain development in the airport overlay, we bring to that commission and then would bring that feedback to you as the planning commission as well. Very good. Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you.
So I kind of forget who I called on. So I think Commissioner Sparati, have I called on you for this one? Okay, I thought maybe. Alderman Russell.
No questions, thank you.
Okay. So when we do these rezonings, we normally talk a lot about the change or mistake. And I see here that the city is arguing the mistake and has all the backup. What I cannot remember from the workshop is, why is the city asking for this? This is actually an applicant sponsored map amendment. I'm sorry. This is being filed by Bruce Dean as the attorney representing their client, who the city is the property owner, but we have a contract to sell this property to. Okay. Point. Okay. So we're not technically the applicant. We're the property owner, and the mayor has authorized this this contract holder to act on behalf of the city or allow an application to be made on our property. Okay, that actually kind of clears it up, and we probably talked about this at the workshop. So if everybody knew that, I do apologize, but it just connected the dots because I did see Bruce Dean, and I was wondering how that all fit in. All right. I don't have any other questions. Anybody else? Okay, so that takes us to the last item, and this is a text amendment for Article 8, accessory dwelling units. Great, thank you, Gabrielle, once again. So this was at our workshop last month. Just to preface the conversation, since we just talked about the zoning map amendments, text amendments are only one planning commission hearing for a recommendation. If the commission is ready to make a recommendation at that time, always an option to continue things if you would like to. So this would be one hearing, and at the end, a recommendation to the mayor and board. We have made a couple changes since we talked about it at workshop. I summarize those on page 2 and 3 of the staff report. Just quickly to run through those. There was a disconnect in our existing code about the MXZ zoning district. So MXZ is the mixed employment floating zone. The only MXZ development we have in the city is Riverside Corporate Park up off Gas House Pike and Monocacy Boulevard, that area. Currently, accessory apartments, which would be a accessory to a non-residential use, some sort of, you know, a caretaker's unit at a public storage type place. There's conflicting information between our use matrix and then the conditional use criteria for that, where one says it's allowed, the other one does not.
we have revised this since we're kind of merging the concepts of accessory apartment and detached dwelling unit into one thing being ADU. We've taken it out of the realm of possibility for being in the MXC district. So you would not be able to apply for an accessory apartment or an accessory unit. A non-residential use in the MXC is currently the way it's drafted. And that's kind of consistent with the concept that we were working with the master plan development, that master plans in general, we want someone to incorporate the ADUs as part of that grand vision. And thereafter, they would not be allowed in those developments. So that's kind of a technicality. But that's one change. The second item we did talk about at workshop, I think I made a verbal note of it. The information about the height was, it didn't really make sense the way it was drafted. We said something couldn't be taller than the principal structure or 1/2 the height. No, I'm sorry, it was 25 feet or 1/2 the height of the principal structure, whichever is less. If you had a 1-story structure, 1/2 of that, which would be the lesser of the two, you'd have a, 10.5-foot tall ADU, which wouldn't make a lot of sense. What it was intended to say was that it would be equal to the height of the primary dwelling or 25 feet, whichever is less. So that has been modified. Quick note, if the ADU doesn't meet the setbacks, so if someone's doing an addition to an existing garage to create that, but it doesn't meet our newly defined setbacks for the ADU, then the height would be limited to 20 feet or the height of the principal structure, whichever were less. The third change, moving on to page 3, sorry. There's the requirement that they be located within the rear yard. We've relocated that section to new construction only. Part of the issue is we may have some non-conforming garages that are located, for example, on a corner lot. Which doesn't have a rear yard by our new definition, that would still be able to be converted to a residential use, but new construction would have to happen in an actual rear yard, or the distance between the rear of the house and the rear property line. This does have the effect of not allowing a new ADU on a corner lot because it does not have a rear yard. The intent is to get these units to be in basically backyards, behind houses, not adjacent to other existing structures. So corner lots will be at a bit of a disadvantage the way this is written because they don't have a rear yard. However, they would still be allowed to create an accessory apartment in their dwelling unit. And they would also be allowed to convert an existing structure to an ADU. So that's something actually Alderman Russell had provided a lot of backup that we forwarded to you. And in looking at that further and kind of analyzing how the proposal that was referenced in that example would fit in today, it wouldn't technically be allowed. So something to be aware of. And then that prompted me to clarify in the code a little bit how those corner lots would be addressed. The fourth change was related to the concern about things on wheels, little houses that people are trailing along. We simply stated that they have to be constructed on a foundation. But anything of this size would have to have footers to be constructed. And otherwise, if you have something that you're trying to live in that's moving, it would be an RV or a mobile home or a trailer. And then we do have an existing regulation that says you can't live in those for beyond a period of time on a property. I have different bigger dogs with me today, so you might hear my bigger dogs. They have big barks. The last change, this is related to the setbacks. So we had the way it was drafted when you saw it at the workshop, saying that the newly constructed ADUs have to meet, detached ones have to meet the requirements of 1/2 the setback for the principal dwelling unit if they're further than 6 feet away from it. That, in looking at all of the variable setbacks that could happen, if these were allowed in a townhouse development, some townhouses have, or maybe a duplex situation, maybe they only have a 5-foot setback. So 1/2 of the setback would be 2.5 feet from the adjacent property line, which would actually be less than you're currently allowed to construct a regular garage. So that didn't seem right? We have standards for garages, sheds, those sorts of things. Everything requires a 3-foot setback from property lines. So this has been modified to say 1/2 or 3 feet. So if your side setback is 8 feet, you're going to modify it down to 4, and that's fine. But if your side setback's only 5 feet, we're not letting you go to 2.5 feet. You still got to stay above the 3 feet that would otherwise be acceptable for any other type of accessory detached structure on your property. So those were just a couple of clarifications. Tried to follow up the workshop with as much information as we could that was requested. We had a great discussion at workshop. We did talk to folks in the emergency response business and did not receive any overwhelming concern that there would be a challenge finding these that generally have, sub addresses. We talked with our addressing folks in GIS, so there was not a lot of concern there. We did provide the survey responses, both embedded in the staff report, added some summary data, but then have attachments to give you that full detailed data. Did provide some additional information about ADUs as affordable housing, which is super fascinating if you really want to spend time reading about it. In summary, my takeaway of it was that it provides affordable housing in so much that it provides housing alternatives that are different than normal affordable housing. Affordable housing generally talks about, a percentage of the income you're spending on housing, right, is what defines as affordable. Beyond a certain point of your income, if you're spending more than that on your housing, it's no longer, affordable for people. The studies that I was able to find that were primarily out on the West Coast, because that's the area where you're seeing the most kind of long history of having ADUs, recognize these as an anomaly because they found so many of them that were rent-free or that were really, really low rents, like outside of the norm. And this was saying, well, these are being used for family members. These are being used for kind of an alternative living arrangement. And that in itself is an important part of affordable housing. So will the units be cheaper than another market rate unit apartment somewhere that's comparable size? Maybe not. It's not going to be maybe a more affordable multifamily unit, but it does so much provide flexibility. I thought one of the other really interesting takeaways was about, this comprehensive plan, we've focused a lot more on equity in housing. And a lot of multifamily developments, and for good reasons, but they're in congested areas. They're close to highways. They're in more intensely developed areas where you don't have some of the neighborhood amenities that you do in more suburban settings. So I thought it was an interesting takeaway that these units could allow for people access into neighborhoods that they otherwise wouldn't, to greener spaces, to more close proximity to parks, those sorts of things, because traditional multifamily development can be in very dense areas, and that's good. They're close to transit, they're close to services and those sorts of things, but kind of infusing maybe a more diverse population into neighborhoods that would not be accessible if they had to be homeowners or even rent in that area. So I thought that was kind of a cool perspective. So a lot of additional research that we provided, and I think that was it. Tried to focus in the staff report that we didn't have a lot in the workshop about the consistency with the comprehensive plan and the code, since those are the Planning Commission's decision-making factors. When we're looking at a text amendment, we want to think about the extent to which this will implement our comprehensive plan and the extent to which it's compatible with our existing regulations. So kind of expounded upon not only the current comprehensive plan, when I say current, the 2010 that's in effect till October, and then moving into the 2020 plan as well, because we obviously know that that's the direction we want to go in. So it would be silly to ignore that. And that's all I have.
That was a lot. That was actually
Excellent.
really good, really, really helpful. Let's do a roll call. Commissioner Strawson.
Commissioner Strawson, thanks, Gabrielle. That sounds like you guys have put a lot of work into this, and I will have more specific questions after I had a chance to look at it, so I apologize. But it did occur to me, one of the things that I thought was a take home from the workshop was the fact that, sometimes we don't know the impact of what we're doing until it's too late, and we've had things that we wish we didn't have. There be incorporated, or is
Joan, you just froze up.
kind of, I don't know why.
Okay, you're back.
Okay. Is there any way to do some kind of monitoring, or any plan to have some kind of a monitoring of the effect of this so that it doesn't get, if it turns out to have not been such a great idea, so it doesn't go too long and wreak havoc in the city?
That's a great observation and question. So I think this approach is, I think it's fairly conservative in terms of where it would be allowed. I think that the design regulations are going to constrain things, honestly, and it may not be as flexible as some people want it to be, because I think there are going to be a lot of properties that once you start trying to pile in the parking requirements and setbacks and no corner lots in this location, and I think it's going to constrain things. So I think it's a good approach to start more conservative, see how people are using it. Also, see how people are approaching us about using it and where we're going, oh, no, 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 you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. Because then that's going to help inform us, are those situations that we want to allow? Or are we good with our regulation the way it is? In terms of monitoring, it's definitely something that we will be having to create new permits for this type of structure. So we'll be able to track in our database, every permit that comes in, get a permit number. So we'll be able to kind of easily run reports from that permitting system about how many we're getting, how they're located, and you would be able to pull and do a nice summary of, okay, where are we seeing these, where are we not? I read an interesting article and I didn't forward it to you, but I will send it on to the Planning Commission. Arlington County, Virginia, is implemented an ADU ordinance, and they had a very small number. They were saying how it has not been as prolific as people expected. And I don't want to give the representation that, oh, no one's going to apply for these. But something that we don't factor into a lot, because it is kind of outside of our realm, but it was a financing requirements. The article I read was talking about how when there is a requirement for one of the units to be owner occupied, apparently the banks don't see a lot of, and if you need a loan for that construction, the banks don't see that as being very value added for them, because they are investing in additions to properties or creation of new dwelling units that they will never be able to sell separately. So one of the opinion piece in this article I was reading was basically that if you really want these things to be prolific, get rid of the owner occupancy requirement, do away with it. Let these be, let these be both rental units, let them be fully, independent kind of units. So I thought that was, I guess my point is that there are going to be a lot of factors that are going to be controlling, and some we aren't even aware of. Some that are behind the scenes, oh, you couldn't even get a loan to do it. That's not something that would come across our desks at all to understand.
Right.
So,
Great,
yes,
thank you.
Yeah, I think we will be able to track successfully
Okay.
to see what's happening.
Perfect. Thanks. That's all I have.
All right, sorry guys, it took me a while to get my cursor on the right screen. I had my 3 screens up and that gets a little wild. All right, Commissioner Sparati.
I don't really have any questions. It's just on the report, I was looking and I have like multiple pages of half and partial comments that don't seem to connect to anything. Does anyone else have that? And so it'll just say, with large public meetings and citizens group gathering and discussing the proposed changes, we CANN, and then that's it. That's all it says.
And that's on your hard copy, right?
Yeah, on my hard
Okay.
copy.
I'm actually on the computer now.
Just I don't know. Well,
Yeah.
things blurry. You don't want to see my house, but yeah, so I'm just noticing it's like half.
What page specifically, if
There's
you can
no
give a
page
page?
numbers.
Oh,
So
okay.
It's you see these, it looks like it's responses, like a survey response or something. And so there's a couple pages with blue and white offset columns. And then after those, it's just it's like these were supposed to be tied to something else.
I think the problem, and I'll send you all the Excel file. So that was an Excel file, and I think that was the wrapping of those comments that you printed, just printed.
It's just
Good. No,
not like a huge deal, but I was just like, I'm
What is this gibberish? Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I agree. We see ANN. All right.
No,
Yeah.
thank
It was
you
an
for
Excel,
mentioning that.
Excel format. I will send that to you right after this meeting.
Great. That's it for me.
Okay, Commissioner Beatty.
Again, in my newbie status, just how these things, I think one of the questions before that Gabriel was talking about was some of the, and Joan brought up, some of the unintended consequences of what we decide on. But if I'm looking at the item 3 that Gabriel talked about, are there benchmarks that the city needs to track in terms of what percentage of our housing is deemed affordable when it comes to reporting back to HUD, I would imagine? Is that something that we can quantify during the permit process, et cetera, to show what stock, what percentage of the stock of our housing is affordable and how this might impact it?
Good question. So we, sorry, getting reverb. We do have a community block grant development program where we do reporting to HUD. We do get funding from HUD for certain programs. I'm not super well versed in that, just in general, what type of things go into that reporting, and Joe might chime in because he has been involved in that over the years. In terms of how these units would be affordable, we don't, unless we had some sort of rental licensing where we were quantifying the rental amount, I don't think that would be something we would be able to control.
Okay.
Just to add on to that, the city does not keep track of affordable units, only because we don't keep track of how much rent is being charged or what the home ownership value is for that. It's very difficult because it's always in flux. And our reporting to the HUD is just how many units we created through programs like LIHTC or through the city county pilot programs. So usually what we do use SStat and figure out average median price of a house, and then we try to do percentages and do cohorts through that kind of process.
Okay, thank you.
Just as an interesting side note, we do have a moderately priced dwelling unit ordinance that requires that 12.5% of units be affordable in a development. However, there is an option for a developer to pay out of that into a fee in lieu of fund. So for new construction, you would equate the 12.5%. They either need to provide those as affordable, or they need to contribute a fee in lieu of providing those. And then those funds are used to help support programs to create, to provide weatherization assistance and all sorts of to help ultimately make homes more affordable. The city doesn't build affordable housing, but those programs do get to support that. We've had a lot of low-income housing tax credit. Joe mentioned the LIHTC projects. We have had a number of those this year, so it's been an exciting thing.
But certainly outside of this program, because you're not going to be able to quantify what people are charging for there. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Alderman Russell.
Some questions and comments. I'd like to ask Gabrielle to go back to the corner lot situation that she was explaining, and then saying that in certain situations this would not be permitted. Can you walk me through that one more time, just so I can get my head around it?
Absolutely. So by definition, a corner lot does not have a rear yard. It has two front yards. It has the front yard that the house is fronting on, and then what we call maybe the side street that it's abutting, that is also a front yard. So the front setback, say you're zoned R6, your front setback in that zoning district is 25 feet. So you hold a 25-foot setback along each of those property lines. Opposite of those two property lines, so on the two interior ones, you have side setbacks or interior setbacks. So maybe it's a 6-foot interior setback. So on a corner lot, you technically don't have a rear yard, because that's the distance between the rear of the the rear building restriction line and the rear property line by definition, but you don't have a rear property line because you have two sides. The other problem you run into in new construction is that no accessory structures are allowed within a front yard. So within the front setback. So on a corner lot, you're going to be holding a very restrictive setback along that side street. So by the time you push that setback in, and this is more kind of from a practical perspective, by the time you push that front setback in and then you have two interiors, you're not going to have much meaningful space to create something substantial. So in that sense, new construction, if you have no rear yard, and we require them to be in a rear yard. Now the interesting thing is we have a couple of situations with corner lots. We have what's called a reverse corner lot, which is where the lot at the corner is fronting one direction and the house that abuts it directly to the rear is fronting that side street. So as opposed to two back-to-back corner lots that the houses are pointing away from each other, you have one where the house is pointing straight ahead and the other one that's pointing towards that perpendicular kind of that property line that's facing the side street. So in that instance, that house is going to be, the house that it's abutting is going to be facing the direction where someone, and in the situation that Alderman Russell presented in her supporting documentation, that's a reverse corner lot where you would have that structure very close to the direction the house was fronting on behind it. Which is not a very advantageous situation in any conversation, I don't think. So that's where that restriction would come in. Like I said, it's pretty conservative because it automatically kind of zeroes out a chunk of lots, but it also is it's aiming to be compatible. And corner lots have unique setbacks and situations. The issue, unfortunately, is that we have a lot of non-conforming corner lots because the regulations didn't change to define them as having two front yards until 2005. Before that, we held like a street setback, which was generally less than the required front yard. So maybe you had a 25-foot front setback, but the street side, which is also now a front, was only 15. So you might have structures that are now within the secondary front yard that weren't at the time. This ordinance would allow for the conversion of those, which I think is pretty reasonable. But that's how it's structured currently.
Okay, that makes some sense. I think that's responsive to a lot of the concerns that I know I've been hearing from folks about compatibility. While I do realize that, I think a conservative approach is the best approach in something like this that is, vastly different than anything we've done before in the city. And I think that a measured response is good. I did have a question about, I had expressed a strong support for these kinds of structures to be approved through the Zoning Board of Appeals rather than straight to building permit. My concern there is essentially public and resident feedback, the ability for someone to, as they do with all of our meetings and with other public meetings, chime in on how this may affect them. And if this is allowed to happen at building permit, then the next door neighbor may not even know that it's occurring until it's under construction. And that concerns me greatly. I appreciated the perspective, and I think is a very good one regarding equity and access to neighborhoods that may not be able to be accessed, through the traditional multifamily situation. So that really is an excellent point, and I very much appreciated that. I did want to share that, again, in the survey that we did, and there were a lot of responses, one of the things that really rose to the top was that one of the properties be occupied by the owner. That was a great desire in public sentiment. So I would just urge you to keep that in mind as you consider this. And I thank you for looking at all the supplemental information from a really old case that kind of shows my amateurism at that point in applying all of these laws. But it was, it was a great experience, and I think it does provide some really good context. So thank you for that.
Great. I actually don't have any questions. I haven't had a chance to read through all this. I know I'm not going to be there on Monday also. So, but this is, it looks like there's been a lot of work done on this and a lot of great information. So.
Yeah, I might also just share that because the chair won't be there and because one of our members is not here, I'm not sure that I will be prepared to support a recommendation on Monday. Just so we're prepared for that. It could be a robust discussion, but I'm not sure it's ready for prime time.
Okay. All righty then. And we can certainly, as Gabrielle said, we can certainly table it or continue it, etc. So, and Joan, just as I'm sure that you would do this, I often call Gabrielle and ask her questions like, what's the best way to do this, and remind me how to do that. So
I will
she's
probably
great with
do
that.
on Monday morning before the meeting.
Yeah, I will be completely available. And if you want to talk after this call too about running the meeting, we can do that.
Yep, we can do that real quick. Yep.
All right. So before we adjourn, any other comments or questions, etc.? All right, guys, have a good weekend. Everybody stay safe, and I'll see you at the workshop.
Have
Thank
a good
you.
vacation.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you.